welcome to Writer. I'm your host, Kat Filer, also known as KJ Filer, author of Shadowrunner. My guest today is Sue Tidwell. Sue is a multi-award-winning author owing to her adventurous spirit and thirst to explore the wild places. That passion took her to the Tanzanian bush, where she was infected with an extreme case of African fever, which is a condition that grips the person's heart like a vice and never lets go. In her debut novel, CRIES of the Savannah, Sue is determined to light that fire in the hearts of other readers as well, and she certainly did in mine. Her adventure memoir has been honored with a Reader's Favorite Gold Medal, the Professional Outdoor Media Association's Pinnacle Award, the Wildlife Society Conservation Education Award, and it was a Kindle Book Award semi-finalist. While not at the keyboard, Sue can be found pining for Africa, atop a paddleboard, enjoying her grandkids' antics, or engaged in the latest outdoor adventure with her husband, Rick. Sue, it's good to see you. How you doing?
It's good to see you too, Kat. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be talking to you as in person as we have been. But yeah, I feel like I know you, and I'm really looking forward to running into you out west.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it. It's been so great to get to know you, even on social media.
Yeah. You grew up in awe of Africa, which I totally understand. We talked about some of the books that you had read, Death in the Long Grass, and then you had read about the Man-Eaters of Salvo in prep for a trip out to this place. What were you thinking?
I don't recommend doing that.
No. At least you had some idea of what you were getting into, but maybe that's a little scary. So yeah, is that why? Are those books why you joined your husband on the African game hunt, or had you already decided to go?
Well, I had always wanted to go to Africa. Like I said, I grew up watching Tarzan. That might age me a little bit, but I love Tarzan movies on the winter weekends. And so I watched a lot of Tarzan. I just was infatuated with Africa. So I always wanted to go. And then, of course, I married my husband, and he wanted to go to Africa. Our dreams are quite different, as you'll learn in the book, but very different. And I had he had read the books first, Death in the Long Grass and the Man-Eaters of Salvo, and had recommended them to me. At first I was like, I don't know, but I read them. I couldn't put them down. I mean, they're just those kind of books that are just gripping. And and so actually I had read those, to be honest, quite a few years before we were going to Africa. So that's probably a good thing, because some of those horrors had faded out of my memory a little bit. I mean, I remembered them, but I didn't remember the details. You know what I mean? Like the itty gritty details of some of them. So,
well, but it probably gave you an idea of what was realistic to be, afraid of, and what was not. So yeah, I know you talked a little bit in your audio book, which I'm listening to now. And I want to say to listeners, if you have read the book, look for the audio book, because the book is fantastic. The audio book is a whole nother dimension. First of all, it's Sue reading it, and you actually narrate this. So to the listener, I say, you're having her tell you the tale. It's like sitting down and having her regale the adventures. And then you have been really brilliant in putting in sounds of Africa and, putting us there in a way that, description is one thing, but to hear it is another thing. So
I'm so excited about that. I mean, I got the idea, and I thought, I just want people to experience what I experienced and hear the sounds I heard and feel that mix of foreboding and yet excitement when you hear those sounds at night. So anyway, that's how I incorporated the sounds and stuff.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the day when there is a virtual experience, when you can sit in a room and be in your tent and feel the heat and, smell-o-vision and everything. So
I could do without tsetse flies, though.
Well, maybe, okay, yeah. No tsetse flies, yeah. Maybe that's an add-on. So yeah, that was segue right into that. So your first experience was a attack.
Yeah, we were all excited. We flew clear from America. We're in, the plane basically 24 hours, spend the night, get on another bush plane for 2.5 hours. And we're finally getting to bush Tanzania and gonna see our first bits of wildlife. We're so excited. We might see elephants, we might see giraffes. What do we see? We get tsetse flies. I mean, we are attacked by a whole battalion of tsetse flies, and those things are brutal. They suck the blood out of you and they don't die. They're like vampires. They're like miniature vampires. You can try to kill them, but they don't die. But anyway, so that was our first wildlife of Africa.
Well, and from what you said, this was your first sort of, we better think about our attire today.
Yeah, yeah. We had all the stuff. We had I had bug nets, bug repellents, you name it, we had it packed in the other vehicle. We didn't think we needed it going from the bush plane, so it was all packed away. So we were like sitting ducks on the back of that
That's so
van
funny.
cruiser that first day.
Well, you had me from page one. Now, admittedly, I might be a little bit of an atypical woman. I've been camping since I was a teen. I grew up in a neighborhood where there were not a lot of girls, so I played touch football and I camped in my backyard. And one of my friends had a telescope, and we used to sit out there and do that. So I really got into camping. My mother was horrified. Her idea of camping is a hotel room, or was. And my father called it bivouac. So he was not going to take me camping either. But I went on my own. And so when I heard that you had done this, I thought, oh yeah, I would totally do this, until I started reading your book and I thought, I don't know. I mean, I would like to think I would do it, but it was quite the adventure, and not like camping in Idaho.
No, not like Idaho, but you would love it. I mean, I'm not saying it isn't a little terrifying, but if you're an adventure lover and you're willing to camp, I think you just got to get there and then you deal with it. You know what I mean? I've had so many people say, oh, I could never do that. I'm like, oh, yes, you could. Yes, you could. You would love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And before I met Rick, I had done a lot of packing in, packing out, but not in Montana where you have grizzly or anything like that. I'm not afraid of alligators. I'm not afraid of Florida bears or East Coast bears. I understand them, but I don't. I'm afraid of animals that I don't understand. And this is, I think, where the bravery really comes in with you. You're going someplace where the animals are not ones you're familiar with. An awful lot of them could be lethal. So yeah, how did that happen when you got there?
Well, I wanted to see Africa so bad, and Rick and I's views were so different, but at the same time, this was going to allow me to see it. So I just kind of, as I say, I put on my big girl pants and packed a bag and just went for it. And I have to say, I'm a very trusting person. So it didn't take me long once I was there, to really put total trust in the people we were there with, the crew. Don't get me wrong, I knew that there was danger everywhere. So I had my eyes open and was aware, but I also felt like they kept me in this bubble of safety. So I could go through my life just kind of enjoying the experience and feeling like they had my back,
Yeah.
And the fact, this was a main concern, but the fact that our tent was a zippered tent with floor bottoms, because, if you've tented in backcountry, your tent usually is just a grass floor with a tarp thrown down.
Yeah.
So critters can get under there, snakes and spiders and mice. But in Tanzania, luckily, our tent was zippered. So at least snakes and bugs and spiders could not get in the tent. So that gave me, like, at night, granted, lions could still tear through if they wanted. But luckily, we were told that the wildlife looked at those tents as impenetrable barriers. Like, lions don't go, oh, hey, that's a tent, I can rip right through that. So that's what we were told anyway. And I chose to believe what they told me.
Yeah, but they seemed like they really had your comfort in mind. You said that they had walls going out to the bathroom. So, you were, relatively safe that way.
We were told, do not leave your tent at night. Do not. And I listened. Yeah. I've heard horror stories of people who did, that they go outside to go to the bathroom or something.
Oh,
and
God.
a lion gets them or an elephant gets them. And yeah. I know of somebody that, I know of two people that I don't know them personally, but I know, anyway, that's not a story, but that's not a good thing. I listened. I did not leave my tent at night. And they had our little bathroom butt up against the tent. So when we did have to go, and I always waited for Rick, we went together. We could unzip the tent, we'd go through there, and they did warn us, look in the rafters and stuff, because snakes are, you're in Africa. So we'd have our little flashlight, and they had a solar lights on in the night, so I could turn a little light on. But it's still scary though. You're going to the bed, you know,
Yeah.
you're sitting there and you're looking everywhere. But that did give us a relative bit of safety because of that little enclosed area. And then the tent, like I said, I never even saw a bug in my tent the entire 3.5 weeks we were there. So that made me feel good that I wasn't going to wake up with a black mamba on my lap.
Well, and you had experience with snakes, but you said that the ones in Africa were stealthy snakes.
Well, you know, the ones in Idaho, we have a lot of rattlers right in our canyon, but they let you know. They're, you know, they give you their little warning and you're like, oh, okay, snake, I see ya. But in Africa, they're deadly. And, you know, rattlesnake, as my mother-in-law would say, probably won't kill you.
Yeah.
Not that I want to check that out, but but anyway, in Africa, there's a lot of them that are just pure deadly, and there's, you know, you're not going to even make it to a hospital. So you have to be very wary. And there's like, I think 30,000 snake bite deaths a year in Africa to the African people that and a lot of those probably aren't even reported. So it is a serious thing that you have to look out for. But we were pretty safeguarded from that being in a tent. And then even when we were on safari, I was always 4th or 5th in line. So that meant there's 4 people ahead of me. So I figured, okay, it's gone by then. That's what I told myself anyway.
When we first moved to Arizona, I wasn't really terrified of, you know, because I had been an outdoors person in Florida and all up the East Coast and everything. But when we first moved out to Arizona, I thought, okay, this is new terrain. So for a while, we only hiked in places where people were out and hiking first. So I thought, okay, if there's somebody on the trail, they've moved on. So yeah, good plan, Sue. I like your thinking.
Oh, in Alaska, when we lived in Alaska, I always hiked with a bunch of girls.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's a good thing, because when there's a bunch of girls hiking, there's a lot of this going on. So the animals knew we were there long before we ever saw them. Now, when I hiked with Rick, it was a whole different story, because then it was quiet and then you could really surprise an animal. So we had to be much more aware and have our bug spray, you know, everything, or not bug spray, but bear spray ready.
Well, and you're out actually hunting. So the whole point is to sneak up on something.
Yeah. So. Well, sometimes with Rick, we weren't always hunting. We were hiking, but you're right. When you're with Rick in the wilderness, you're being quiet, because even if you're not hunting, you're scouting or you're looking for animals. It's a whole different purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a brief time in my life where we were up in Tennessee over the summers, and I made a friend, and he was a real outdoors person, and he thought I was interesting because I was a girl that was willing to go out and camp and hike and stuff like that. But the first trip out, I remember he stopped me and he said, "Oh, for the love of God." And then he showed me how to walk. Okay. He said, "You sound like a herd of elephants coming through the forest. We're not going to see anything."
Oh, it's so funny. I bought for this other trip, I bought pants that I thought would be, well, anyway, but you're right. Even the rubbing against the pants. So you have to walk like this so that your legs don't rub together. I mean, there's a whole way to walk in the woods.
It's so funny. Yeah. So tell me how you were feeling when you started actually going out and looking for animals, which could be dangerous animals.
Oh, it's just so exciting. It's so, like, I just love that in Africa, you never know what's around the next corner. I mean, you're going around and then you go around a bush and there might be a whole herd of zebras and hartebeest or giraffes. And then you might go for a little while and around the next corner, you'll see impala and another herd of elephants. It's just you know, and we were in a hunting concession. So animals did not just stick around. I mean, they left. So you got to see them in fleeting moments, or their backsides disappearing into the bush. But and like for instance, giraffes were my favorite. Seeing them in motion, in the freedom like that, you know, you see them in the zoo standing around, but when you're in Africa, they're like any other animal. They're running, even though we weren't, you know, they see a vehicle, they're running. It's not like national parks where they're just standing there. But seeing them in motion is just a sight to behold, just beautiful. So I love that.
Yeah, I have to say your descriptions, I mean, I've always wanted to do that, but your descriptions really struck me and made me want to go. I would love for you to talk about Masimba Camp and the crew, particularly about Lillian, but I know you got to, it wasn't just animals, there were people, and it was a whole different way of thinking about things.
Yeah, I went over there with I had a lot of misconceptions. And as I was over there, I learned so much from the people of Masimba Camp. We had 21 Tanzanians representing 6 different tribes taking care of us. And they were just so wonderful. Not all of them spoke English, but I learned a lot of Swahili while I was over there, which was really fun. And we were really lucky. We had Lillian as our game scout. And my husband is a hunter. So that was the whole premise of this. I am not a hunter. And I was really conflicted about hunting certain species. Even though I grew up in a hunting family, I was really conflicted about hunting certain species. But after I was over there, I came to understand why it is so important, and how it affects the people of Africa. But anyway, when you are over in Africa, in Tanzania, they assign a government game scout with every hunting party to oversee and document everything and to make sure everything's legal. So Lillian had just met these 20 people at Masimba Camp that day too. I mean, she had never seen them before. She's not affiliated with a hunting concession in any way. I mean, because that would be kind of a conflict of interest, if she's to oversee them. So she didn't know anybody either. And luckily she was assigned to us. And so we're together from 6 a.m. till 7 at night. And she spoke pretty good English. And she was 23 years old and so smart. You have to have some college education to be a Tanzanian game scout. And she taught us so much. It became so much more than just about, of course, my husband was hunting, but she'd pick up seed pods and tell us what she did with them and how you made tea out of them. She'd get bits of fruit and let us sample them. I mean, it just became so much more than like a hunting safari. Wow. And I just learned so much from her, and she really blew away my perceptions were kind of blown out of the water about poaching and different things that I didn't know about. And I just fell in love with the African people of Masimba Camp. They are just so wonderful.
So the culture too.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I'd love you to talk a little bit, because I've read it in your book, a little bit about how we as Americans have this romantic idea about the animals and everything, and then the reality. And I'm just going to interject, as my mom's whole side of the family were hunters. My father's side of the family, not so much. I have actually hunted, not big game, and I'm willing to eat things if I'm willing to put them on the table. So that's always sort of been my attitude about it. But I don't think that's common. I think it's easy here in the United States to go into a grocery store with no regard for where that came from or what it is. And what I got out of your book was the idea that when you live in a culture where you're a little bit closer to nature, then you're more aware of that. And I think that, that would change people's lives if they could just go out, maybe not there, but just anywhere, outside of suburbia.
Yeah, Africa is, it's so much different. We live with such romanticized views of wildlife, even here in America, but especially in Africa. And I was one of those. I mean, I grew up in a deer hunting family. I ate deer my whole life growing up. But when my husband wanted to hunt a zebra, I was mortified. So that was one of my first learning experiences over there. And, everything has to be managed, and habitat has to be valued, because the population of Africa is growing like crazy. So if you don't make that habitat valuable in its wild state, it's going to be turned into farmlands and pastures and that kind of thing, because the people need to eat. They need financial thing. And even worse than that is, the habitat's a critical thing, but living with lions and elephants that we adore from afar, how would you like your kids to go to school with a lion in between them?
Yeah.
And say you plant 2 acres of crops, and that's your whole livelihood for the year. And now an elephant comes through in a night and destroys everything of yours. your entire income for the whole year. Your kids can't go to school, your kids can't eat. Protein is very scarce in Africa. Even though it's a cattle culture, they don't eat very much of the meat themselves in the rural areas. So they're really protein deficient. And it's just fascinating. But you have to put yourselves in the mindset of the people living there, living with these wild animals, how they have to arrange their lives to be safe.
Mhm.
They have to walk 2 or 3 miles a day, sometimes the women do, to go get water. And now you get there and you have to deal with crocodiles and hippos.
Yeah.
So a well is not only a convenience thing, it is a lifesaver. A well in a village is a lifesaver. And so many people just literally disappear because they're just never seen again. If no one's there to witness attack, they're just gone.
Mhm.
Part of Africa, just recycled system. And but anyway, so you have to look at it from their standpoint and realize what it's like to live with those animals. And that's the only way we can really protect them, is to understand what we're dealing with. And their needs have to be accounted for. We have to include what works for them as well. They have to have input into management.
Yeah, and I was struck by your willingness to go out into not just Africa, but in really a wild area. I mean, that was quite the journey to get out there. And then you start really realizing how far you are from civilization. And then I've heard other people say, oh, yeah, but ecotourism, yeah, that means you have to put in a hotel and roads and stuff. And now you're ruining the landscape. So if you're really willing to go out there, you have to be willing to go out there. So, yeah.
And that's another big misconception. We see too much National Geographic.
Yep.
So you think, when you picture a hunter hunting in Africa, you picture driving through a national park and everything's just standing there like a shooting gallery. And it's not like that at all. I mean, every area that can be used for phototourism is pretty much used. So the areas that hunters go are really remote. They don't have infrastructure. They have tsetse flies. They don't have the beautiful landscapes. They don't have the waterfalls. They don't have the things that tourists look for. Most tourists, general tourists. I'm not saying everyone, but most general tourists, they want to land. They want to be in national parks within a few hours of landing on their international flight. They don't have to pay charter jets and all these things. So hunting tourism protects a whole bunch of habitat that is unprotected by ecotourism. Because like you said, a lot of people don't want to sleep in a tent. They want to sleep in a lodge. And that's not impossible in a lot of areas of rural Africa. And that's another thing. Hunting, all that money for phototourism, ecotourism stays kind of in those areas.
Right.
Hunting tourism is spread, that money is spread all throughout in all these little tiny communities. So that's what's another significant aspect of it.
Well, that makes sense. And then also some of the animals that you're hunting are going to end up feeding people too.
All of them. Not, I'm telling you the joke, or I don't know if it's a joke, but the saying is all that's left is the wet spot. Because
Okay. No, really.
Everything is taken. I mean, everything is utilized. And even when we were 4 hours even from the nearest village. So of course, and there was no refrigeration. So all of the meat had to be dried, had to be cut into strips and dried like on a clothesline. And so it looked like red socks hanging everywhere. But that's how they had to share the meat in the Simba camp. Now it's different every country and stuff, but the meat, lots of times it just goes directly to we were, just for an example, this was supposed to be once in a lifetime, but we went to Namibia after that because you can't go to Africa just once. And Rick was hunting Cape buffalo. Now that meat, we never even got to taste that meat. That meat went straight to the game scouts, or it went straight to the government to feed the game scouts that were there patrolling that park. And because there was a lot of rhinos in that park. So that meat went to feed the people and the rangers, and also to orphanages and stuff like that. So we never even got to try that meat. All that meat went directly to them. We called them up and then they came and they got it. So that's how it works. So it's a little different in every country of Africa.
Okay, but the idea that people have that you're just going to go out there and shoot something, skin it, and leave it there to rot is not the
No,
way it works. And so
no.
that's what one of the things I got out of your book. I am a disciple these days, Sue. I'm shoving your book at people when they say something
Yeah.
uninformed. I'm like, I got a book for you. No, thanks. I don't want to. Yes, you do. Read. No, I don't want to read it. And my answer is, well, you really should read this. Okay. And then talk. Okay. So first know before you talk. So yeah. And I think, and I've been guilty of that. So, anyway.
Oh, I was guilty of it. I mean, that's why I wrote the book, because I didn't get it either. And after being there and really become so attached to the African people,
Yeah.
I felt like their story needed to be, their side of the story needed to be told in a way that maybe people could relate to. And so that's why I wanted to share it with the world, basically, and share what I learned and share my experience. But and
Yeah.
even hunters, a lot of times they don't understand hunting in Africa because they are by the concept, if I can't eat it, I'm not going to shoot it. But what you don't understand in Africa is, yeah, you might not eat it and you might not be putting it in your freezer, but I'm telling you, seeing a people that are protein deprived get that meat will touch you in a way that you can't even put into words. I just can't tell you what it means to see that and be a part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and then the money too, and I hate to bring this up, but I think it's part of it too, is that people are paying reasonably good money to go out and do these things. It's not an easy thing. First of all, you have to be willing to go and you have to be willing to endure, but then you also have to pay for that. You talked about the flight that would have added 16 hours if you hadn't done that. So you're employing people along the way too.
Well, yeah, that's the trickle down effect. Like for us, I mean, Rick and I aren't rich. We saved, we sold a rental house, we sold our camper, we did all kinds of stuff to make this dream come true. And we had to pay $10,000 for that charter flight. That's a lot of money. But if not, we would have had 16 hours of driving at each end, which would have added another 2 days at each end plus the stay. So we did it, and we were thankful we did after realizing what was involved in 16 hours of driving in a back of a safari vehicle. But yeah, not everyone wants to do that. And like I said, and we bought our groceries from Arusha, we landed in Arusha, we stayed at a hotel, and then money just goes and goes and goes. It's such a trickle down effect.
Yeah. Well, you were a camper before you went, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'd been on hunting trips and stuff. So but this was another step. I mean, this was more than what you had done before. So, yeah. Can you speak to that a bit?
Well, it's kind of funny in a way. Rick, I love going elk hunting with Rick, and I love the backcountry and just being there, and you never know what's going to happen, same type thing. And sometimes you don't do anything but ride horses throughout the mountains and hike, do a lot of hiking, but it's still just so amazing. And Rick always tried to make me comfortable. He put up a nice wall tent, had a little furnace in, a little wood heater in there to keep me warm. But I'm telling you, Africa, I got spoiled. You go there scared to death because, of course, of the animals that are there. But as far as the cushiness of it, I mean, I had a flushing toilet behind. Granted, I learned where that water come from. It came from a little hole in the ground, and it took a lot of work for me to have that flushing toilet, which I felt guilty about later. But I was in kind of seventh heaven. For me, it was like really cushy to sleep. And some tourists might look at it that way. But for me, being used to Idaho's backcountry where you do the PTA, do you remember what the PTA is?
Yeah,
So you do the, little wash out of a little tub of water.
yeah.
In the camp, I could actually get a shower. So it was pretty cushy in that sense for me.
Yeah. As a camper, well, we've graduated to an Airstream, so we don't sleep on the ground anymore. And I actually have a toilet and shower. That's a big deal. But I remember you talking about like being out in the woods is one thing, but they had made you pretty cushy where you were. So yeah. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. So yeah, I also thought it was interesting that that you're eating what they're eating, you're you're hearing about their lives, you're getting to know these people. I know every time Rick and I travel, we try not to be Americans. I know that sounds, it's not like we're not proud of our country, but we go someplace, we try to speak the language as much as possible or try to learn. And if somebody gives me something to eat, I'll eat it. I don't know what it is, but I'll eat it because they're eating it, and it's a bonding thing. Camping is about food and talking and sharing and not being distracted by your phone and stuff like that. And so you're in an extreme situation here. And also you have the opportunity to meet people that are not people you're familiar with, learn what they eat, learn how they live. Yeah.
It was amazing. And I'll tell you, what you said about the language is critical. I've never been good at language. I tried taking it in school and I got an E and I quit. Oh, I hated it. But once I got over there, I was so taken by the people that I felt like, what right did I have to expect them to speak my language? I'm there in their country. So I tried my darndest to learn Swahili. It started with simple things like thank you, asante sana, and, may I have some water, or maji rafiki, it was just small things. But the smiles it brought to the people,
yeah,
the more I learned, you could tell how much they appreciated me speaking in their language or trying to. I screwed it up a lot, but that just made laugh and just made it all lighthearted. But yeah, I had people come to me all the time. Hey, here, and they'd teach me a few more words, and we learned all the animals in Swahili, and it was just really good. And it really did build this bonding thing with us because they knew we appreciated their culture and we're trying to be a part of them, and I always feel like they welcomed us into their world as friends,
yes,
not just clients.
Yeah. And I believe that when you do that, you're showing respect. And you obviously through the book did that. You ended up with some friendships. These people could have just been employees, but they ended up bonding. You ended up bonding with them and them with you. And that's a tribute to you guys that you're out there, not just saying, hey, give me something, but, I want to learn about this. What's that called? And stuff like that.
Well, that's kind of how the whole book started, because I made that promise to Lillian. By the end of the trip, I was so moved by what I had learned and by the whole experience that I felt like people had been telling me all my life, because I write these long 10-page Christmas letters before the book. And they're all adventure. Yeah, adventure-filled Christmas letters. And that was kind of what I was known for. And my friends were always saying, Sue, why don't you write a book? I'm like, who wants to hear my adventures other than you guys? So I never really thought seriously about writing a book. But once I was over there and I was so moved by this whole experience that I promised Lillian before I left that I would try to help the world understand their viewpoints and try to see Africa through their eyes. So I made that promise, and I didn't know what I was promising at the time. I had no idea what to get myself into. I came home and I tried talking to people, I tried doing, and I realized that wasn't enough. And anyway, long story short, it evolved into Cries of the Savannah. Yeah. And just so you know, in the audiobook, Lillian is in the audiobook.
I haven't gotten that far. Oh.
No, it's in the last, I don't want to give it's in the last chapter. So you will get to hear Lillian's voice. She did some guest narration for me.
Oh, so. You gave me the book, or you gave me access to the book, like, I don't know, like yesterday, and I'm on chapter 14.
Oh, you're kidding me. Oh my gosh.
Richard thought, I don't know if he thought I was mad at him or something, but he was talking to me this morning, and I finally turned around and went, what? And he says, you haven't been talking to me in a while. And I said, oh, I'm listening to Sue's book. And he says, oh, so he didn't see the earbuds. But ever since, I logged in and I thought, oh, I'll just sample this. And then I got sucked in. You asked me what I was doing up late last night. I was listening to your book.
Oh, yeah, I wrote you that text. I'm like, what's she doing answering at 12:30 her time?
Yeah. Oh, I was up till 2:30 listening to the book.
Well, so, yeah. Well, it's a great reason to be awake. That's for sure. Listening
it certainly is. Yeah. And I love, first of all, the audiobook is a completely different experience. So I encourage people, if you already own the book, go ahead and get the audiobook anyway, because it's a completely different experience. But also it's so easy to wash the dishes, do laundry, go to get the mail, go grocery store shopping. I don't talk to people in the grocery store anyway. So, I've just got my earbuds in and I'm listening to the book, and it's just really the only bad thing is I talk to you. No one else can hear. Oh my God, Sue, really?
We should have you recording too. That'd be good. We could add that.
It's funny. I caught myself. I was out front and I was talking to you. My neighbor's like waving, and I'm like, oh, he thinks I'm talking to him. Talking in my
It's
book.
so funny. I did the audiobook because I felt like I could reach a whole lot more people that way, since audiobooks is such a thing. And again, it's probably good. I did not know what I was getting myself into. I mean, like this author world it's like a minefield, and there's so much to navigate and to get through. But again, it's a good thing I had no idea what I was getting myself into, because I literally spent almost 4 months in the closet. That was my recording studio.
I remember your celebration dance.
Yeah. Come out of the closet. Yay. I'm so sick to hear myself talk, because I probably listened to it 8 times at least, because I doing the editing and I was learning. So I screwed up a lot in the beginning. So anyway.
It's another thing to learn, it's part of the industry, but now you know how to do it. Is there a book 2?
I haven't started it yet. I've been so out of control with this one still, but there is going to be another one I'm going to start, because even though this was a once in a lifetime adventure, you can't, like I said, you can't go once. So we did go to Namibia and then Mozambique. So I have 2 more books I can actually write. They won't be quite as long as this. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting to that. And I'm hoping the process goes easier this time, since I've already been through it and learned done the things wrong first time around. So,
well, you did very well. I have to say that your outreach too has been amazing. I mean, this is a book that if you had come home and you hadn't made the effort to try to reach out to people, could have just been in just hunting magazines or whatever. But no, you have reached mainstream America, and I know an awful lot of, okay, so the people I know, I pushed into reading it, but I'm sure that there's other people too, because I'm seeing the awards and they're not specific to the hunting community. So you're definitely reaching people.
I sure hope to. I'm sure working hard at it, to reach people, because it isn't a book that some people are turned off as soon as they learn it's about hunting. That it's so disappointing, because it's so much more than that. It's about the people, and it's about the wildlife, and it's about Africa and the wonder of the continent and the perilous part of the continent. I mean, it's about so much more. I would just love people to give it a chance. Just read a couple chapters and decide. But it is hard. A lot of people are turned off initially with that.
Well, sorry, and that's a shame, because I was pretty open-minded when I started reading this book, and as I read it, I thought, oh gosh, I thought that I was in the know, and I wasn't at all. So there were an awful lot of things that you taught me. And I think that even if you don't entirely convince somebody to your side, I can see in there things people need to know and consider, regardless of what their position is on hunting or any of the rest of it. I just think it's a really good thing to read, and just have that in the back of your head, that your experience is not everybody's experience. I think that's really what I took away most from your book, because you also talk about the people and how this plays into saving the animals that we love. It doesn't seem like it would if you don't think about it, but it does.
When you like, when I was there, it started to make total sense. I like to say, you don't need facts and figures anymore. When you put yourselves in the lives of the day-to-day lives of rural Africans, all of a sudden, and you learn what this does for those people, it makes common sense. I mean, it's just, it's horrifying, some of the things these people have to live with, and we have to give them a reason to conserve wildlife.
Yeah. Oh, and I think it's it's not just true in Africa. I think generally speaking, if you're a person who's traveled and seen other cultures, other people, other ways of living. I know when I grew up in the East Coast and moving out west, I had a whole different take on things, and it took me a while to try and come around to the way people in another place, still in America, think. One of the things that I came to appreciate a lot was the tradition of storytelling. It's not such a big thing on the East Coast, but when you go out west, there's an awful lot of cultures who pass on family histories and their culture and stuff through storytelling. So I was really happy that you came back from Africa, because you're qualified to now come back and do storytelling on behalf of people who don't live here. So
yeah, I want to take people there. I want them to feel like they're there with me. So hopefully I do that. But
you definitely made me. I started looking at my pennies.
and and like I said, our Tanzania trip did cost a pretty penny, but it doesn't have to be like that. I don't want to ever scare people off of going to Africa, because there's so many ways to do it, way more economical than the way we did. But so definitely don't let that scare you off. There's just very economical ways to go. You can go there for as price as going to Hawaii. So and it's a whole different experience than Hawaii.
So
it'll change your life. I really believe that going to Africa changes you. You just come home a totally different person. You look at things differently. You look at water differently. You don't let the water run in your sink. I mean, just stupid little things, but you just think of things differently. It changes you in ways it's hard to put in words.
Yeah. I mean, and I even think, well, even just being willing as a woman to go camping. I did say to my daughter, asked me one time what my obsession was with dirt. Okay. And I laughed. And she says, why do you want to go outside your comfort zone? And I said, I cannot explain that to you because you haven't experienced it. And unless you go with me, I can't show it to you. But what I can tell you is that going to places where you don't have the conveniences will change your relationship with power and water. And so that was a thing. And so I think in your situation, it didn't just change, well, you'd already been used to that, but you went out someplace and learned what it means to people in another country. So yeah, I think that's great. Well, Sue, I have really enjoyed this. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And I hope you'll come back for book 2, or just to talk about more experiences.
Always, I would love to come back, and it's so nice to finally meet you pretty much in person. As close as, until someday we meet in real person.
Possibly next year, Richard and I are going to sell the house and start traveling again. So we'll give you a heads up and meet you someplace.
And thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I'm so glad. I was so excited about this. I really was hoping to get you on sooner than later. And to listeners, I would remind you that, as always, I will put all the links below so you can find Sue's books, her audiobook, learn about other things that you might be interested in, and stay abreast of her latest adventures. So thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Kat. It's been so fun and an honor to be here.
Absolutely. Me too.